Welcome, 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 wise women. Mm. Welcome, wise women, the world needs right now. More than the world even knows. It needs us. It needs us. Feel free to, in the chat, drop where you are watching from. Where are you today? Are you at home? Are you in the forest? Are you enjoying a tea by your pool? Just give us an idea of where you are and then drop in a way for us to connect to you, whether that is on a social media platform or if you have something fun that you're giving away these days. We love to share our resources here. So feel free to do that. Connie is saying she wishes she was in the forest. I feel that. I bet, especially being in Las Vegas, where at least on the strip, there's not a whole lot of trees. Oh, all right, everyone. Let's step into our sacred space together. I invite you to gently arrive, fully, wholly, and without rush, right? Without rush. Let's begin with our breaths, because it's one of the beautiful processes that we go through in here that makes this space different. So go ahead and close your eyes if you're comfortable. Uncross your legs, uncross your arms, unclench your jaw, relax your shoulders. Just release that tension. And if you don't have it in you to go through each body part, tense your whole body and then gently release it. Now let's take some deep breaths through our nose and let's take a deep breath and hold it right at the top. And then exhale very slowly through our mouths. Soft and gentle. Let's do two more like that. Let's inhale and open our hearts. Just open that heart space. Be ready for what's going to come your way. And on the exhale, release the tension. Release the tension that the world adds to our lives. And then inhale one more time through the nose. Call yourself back home to your body. And as you exhale, settle in to the stillness of that seat. Allow yourself to begin releasing the noise of the day. Silence your phone. Feel free to open your eyes and close those tabs. If you're like me, sometimes I feel like I'm drowning in tabs. Sometimes I wish I didn't close a tab, but the tabs. Let that to-do list wait. You've carved out this time to be with us for a reason. Something in the messaging, something in the imagery called you. So honor yourself by being totally here. We're going to enter a space of deep reflection, of wisdom sharing, and sacred sisterhood. The mantra that came to me today was, I trust what lives within me. I am ready to reweave what matters most. I trust what lives within me. I'm ready to reweave what matters most. So let's hold that intention together as we explore what it means to live and lead and work in alignment with our truest selves. We're turning inward a little bit more than usual, maybe, because we're going to be talking about strengthening the foundation of our businesses by reconnecting with who we really are. And it's going to be a conversation with the incredible Molly McKinley. Many of you have seen Molly before. She was actually the very first collective conversation highlight in May last year. So our very first event. Our very first wise woman highlighted was Molly. And so, how appropriate that she is back. We're highlighting her in the month of May with this beautiful
Here.
program.
I'll be
And
right
she's
in.
going to share her three-strand braid framework with us and give us a true invitation to lean into the strong, vibrant expression of who we are. And so let me just tell you a little bit about Molly. She is a strategist, a storyteller, a soulful entrepreneur, And she moves through the world with equal parts of intention and intuition. And both of those words, I love that they both start with INT. Because I love a good alliteration, and they both really do stand for who she is. And she's had over 25 years of experience in PR and marketing and brand building, and she is a master. She's a mistress, a goddess, a lioness of connecting the dots between vision and values and voice. And she is the creator of the Three-Strand Braid framework that we're going to be exploring today. It's an approach that helps us as women braid together our deepest purpose and natural genius with our aligned goals. So she is going to help us understand how to do a little bit more with what makes us who we are. She's also the founder of a tea company called Intentionalities, a published author of The Intentional Business, a serial entrepreneur, and an educator who, this is a beautiful story, which I'm sure we're going to talk about a little bit today. She serves as the entrepreneur in residence at Meredith College. She is both fierce and graceful, and she leads from the heart. She listens deeply and invites others to do the same. So let's lean into a sacred conversation with her. Welcome, Molly.
Wow. I mean, that's kind of a setup. I just not like I'm like all in my feels, so
Mm.
I
Well,
adore you.
we have we've done so many collaborations together over the years, and I feel like we're always on the lookout for the next one.
Mhm.
And we did a really fun project during the pandemic called Spill the Tea. That for all of you who are here that were part of that joined us every Tuesday during the Great Pause. Good, exciting news is that we are launching another podcast. It'll
This
be
time we actually know what we're doing now.
yes.
We're not just going to talk for 3 hours and record it.
Yeah, we'll make it more snackable this time. But one of the most beautiful pieces I feel of the collective is the
Ah,
ability to really truly find those women who really want to do life with us, who really um, who share values, who share vision, who share passions. And these conversations that we have today, we're highlighting who Molly is. Next week, we're all on camera and we're all going to share who we are and how this message impacts us. And so each week leads us to more connection and more opportunity to collaborate and more ways to weave our lives together. And so, speaking of weaving, and let's say braiding, we have been promoting your three-strand braid framework this week, and I love this image. So let's talk about that. Let's have you share how this concept first came to you, and then I believe you have an image for us to kind of freeze frame it in our brains. So uh,
yes, I
let's
will.
let's move into that.
Okay. Um, I am trying to find my documents here. Oh, you know what? It's not letting me find it. Do you have it open by chance? Because it's not letting me share from here for some reason.
Let me
Well,
see. Why don't
anyways,
you talk and I'll find.
okay, perfect. I am in the process right now of redoing the intentional business. So the story of it was I kind of hacked it out, if I'm being completely honest, the book, and I literally went and locked myself in a cabin for a week and wrote it, and didn't do a lot of editing, just sort of wrote and then published, and it reads as such. It's not great, and it wasn't. There wasn't masterful storytelling or anything like that. It was just kind of, it was really a hack. And I just want to own that so that, because that's part of the lesson that I've had to learn about who I am as a builder is more of this, don't just get it done mode, but sometimes, take more time. But I'm in the process of redoing this book, and in that process, and then on top of this recent transition in my life of becoming an entrepreneurship educator at Meredith, And, again, deciding I'm not going to hack this. I'm going to like take the appropriate steps. And so went to Babson College and got my entrepreneurship educators training and certificate there. And Babson is, sort of like the hub of entrepreneurship educator. It's like the number one program in the world, actually. And have taken the time to prepare myself to do this well. And that experience at Babson, along with this 25 plus years of helping other people build their businesses, I had my lights going off of um, around this idea of entrepreneurial identity. And what that means to me is, as an entrepreneur, we have this identity, and as a yogi, it's always been this idea of knowing thyself. But entrepreneurial identity gives me a way to talk about it in a framework that's not woo, right? That is the language of business. And that to me was just like, yes, okay, now I have a framework and a language that I can talk about what I know to be true from a spiritual perspective in a way that can be received by others more efficiently. So this sort of started with, well, I think years ago, going back to that original podcast, Deborah, you and I were talking about, we were reading the book Braiding Sweetgrass. And
Yes.
that book was like butter on a toast for me. I mean, I remember just literally like sitting in the bathtub and reading it like those words were like poetry. And essentially, that book, Braiding Sweetgrass, if you haven't read it, it's really a love song to nature in the highest sense. But that imagery of the braiding of the sweetgrass just really stuck with me. And so when I was revisiting, like, how do I talk about what I know to be true from a yogic spiritual perspective about knowing thyself as it relates to entrepreneurial identity and business, because I do feel like my purpose on this planet is to help reimagine business and how business and how women leaders and women business leaders can build businesses that really can change the world. And that sounds maybe a little cheesy, but like that to me is like when I feel myself getting truly inspired, it's because there's a book, Conscious Capitalism by John Mackey, and he talks about why business and conscious capitalism. And it's because our impact, the potential impact of business can ripple so far outward that what it's the only place where we can affect change at that level or that scale. And that was like the yes for me, because I've always felt like a little bit like, I have this yoga stuff and I've got, like all of these, I felt very fractured, if you will, like pockets of my life are very compartmentalized. And I've known like soulfully that they would be woven together in some manner. I just wasn't sure. But this framework of entrepreneurial identity actually did that for me. And so the three pieces for me of the braid that are absolutely critical are your personal values, what you care about, your professional skills, what you're naturally good at, your zone of genius, and then your business goals or where you're headed, like the impact. And some people call it like I say business goals because it's again language, but like that's your flag on the mountain. That's your like um your North Star, your guiding light, whatever it is. Um, and it really is important to make sure that all of those three are woven together because when they're not, that's where we start to feel frayed and fractured. Um, because when they are woven together, it is much, much harder to break and to cut. And that really is the essence of entrepreneurial identity. So,
Ooh, love that so much. Well, I think that we just don't think about having an entrepreneurial identity. I think just the concept of that is missing because we just get in and we start doing.
That's
right?
that's exactly right. And but it actually is the root because as founders of anything, your identity is actually what informs pretty much every part of the DNA of your business. And
Hmm.
so when you don't know who you are, right, and you don't have your values identified, and for me, this professional skills piece, that middle piece, yeah, it seems like so obvious, but the truth of the matter is, most people are always doing the work outside of their zone of genius, particularly as founders. And the example is you have a love of baking, so you start the bakery, but then you end up doing accounting and marketing and real estate, and to try to find your place and the cleaning and all of the other things, right, that require a business to be run well. And then you're no longer baking. And that was true in my business as well as, with Redtail, is that, part of that was, I wanted to launch this business because I love helping other people's businesses thrive. And then as soon as we were a legitimate agency, then I wasn't actually doing the work anymore. I was doing the running of the agency and trying to keep, business coming in and doing more business development than I actually was do creative problem solving. And again, it's like it's very easy to pivot out of your zone of genius unless you are very, very intentional about declaring it and owning it. And the other thing that happens quite often is that, and this is very, very true for a lot of my career too, is where I've had someone wanting me to do things or be the person that I'm not actually. And an example of that is, in a CMO role, if you are on a team of um, very uh, data-oriented people, the expectation is that you speak in data, right? And I speak in heart, and so and so it's one of those situations where I'm trying to be me authentically and tell a story and data, but actually I'm not that person. You know,
Yes.
I, I'm the heart. And that happened over and over and over again. I just kept finding myself in these situations. And the result always was burnout. And burnout, I think, is one of the key indications that you're out of alignment.
This reminds me, and I'd love to see in the chat, like who feels like they speak from the heart too, and that the data piece is the death of us. Because it reminds me of, remember back in, I want to say it was probably like 2010, and everybody was talking about the ROI of social media.
Oh gosh, yes.
Oh my word. Like, and it was everywhere. Everywhere. What's the ROI? What's the ROI? And all of us who are relationship people who build our businesses on relationship or collaboration, we were like, what do you mean? What's the ROI? Like, it's a deeper connection. But it didn't have a number. It didn't have a number. And I feel like instead of the data people coming our way a little bit, everything went their way, and it became all about likes and comments and shares and this having to do something as opposed to having the emotional connection to something.
Yes. I mean,
Why? It's just wow.
well, I mean, you're saying it, right? And again, like I didn't know at the time why that felt so bad for me
Mm,
personally.
yeah,
I got into my pleasing mode where I am just trying to be the thing for somebody else instead of also knowing very clearly like my values, what I'm best at in the room, and what impact I want to create. And when I can be standing there in the sovereignty and I'm in that braid, I can actually hold space in a way that I wasn't able to when those pieces weren't connected for me yet. Um,
right.
So it really is sort of the path to being empowered. And if
Mm,
any of those braids are off, right? Like you don't know where you're going. And again, it's not like for me, it's like the heart like kind of guides you to the place, and then the head gives you the map to get there,
yeah.
right? But you have to know where you're going first. And so for me, Meredith gave me a very strong, and Meredith, just FYI, is the last accredited business college for women in our country. So for me, that alignment with empowered women, next generation, entrepreneurship, I'm tasked with creating a center of entrepreneurship for women. And so that piece of it, for me, gave that flag on the mountain where I know where I'm going. Like
Mm,
my life's work is to build this thing for this next generation of women.
yes.
And every step until now has prepared me to be able to do that thing. Um,
Well, so let's talk about. So
yeah.
first of all, yes to braiding sweetgrass. That is in the Threads Collective shop over on bookshop.org. So we'll be sure to drop that link into the show notes because that is an excellent book. It's an excellent listen, an excellent read. I think I've given at least 6 copies of it out, and it is not a slam bam kind of read. It is a slow soak it in, have read a few pages with a cup of tea kind of book because there's a lot there. And
Yeah.
it's such a beautiful book. So if you haven't, definitely read that. But you have the three strands, right, represented in that gorgeous image. So let's talk about the first one, which is core values. And oh my goodness. Oh my goodness. How much do we love talking about core values? I love talking about core values. And I know
Well,
you do.
well, I do, but I have always sort of like when we've had this conversation before, honestly, like I've always sort of defaulted to you as like, you're the person who actually does that work for other people. And like we've had the conversation many times where I'm like, I'm not really interested in helping people individually. I want to help the companies understand who they are.
Right.
But
Right.
at Babson, I had the mind shift where it's like you can't uncouple the founder's DNA from the business DNA. That is just a part of it. And building authentic brands, you really do have to understand why this business even exists and why someone felt inclined to birth it, right?
Yes.
And that cannot be uncoupled from the person, from the founder.
Yeah.
And that was the big shift because, like I said, I'm like, oh, I don't really want to do the work with people, like that's just not really, but now I'm like, you actually can't undo that. The work has to be done on an individual level.
Yeah.
Um, and then if everyone shows up empowered and visionary in their own sovereignty, then you can actually run together. But you can't do that well with a bunch of folks who don't know who they are.
I
Um,
completely agree. I mean, the problem is that when I do teach on core values, one of the first questions I ask, and I'd love to know the answers in here, so drop it in the chat. When when in your life did you define your core values, if at all? So have you defined your core values, yes or no? Let us know in the chat. And if you have, when was the last time you actually visited those values? Because your values are part of who you are. And they do shift. The priority shifts. I don't find in my work that big words change. I don't find that foundationally, if you value family or you value faith or you value adventure, that those things disappear at some point. They just look differently. Adventure when you're young might look like, camping in your car. And when you're in your 50s, it might look like sipping champagne on the top of the Eiffel Tower, but they're both adventurous, right? And so, visiting our values, defining them or refining them is so important, especially after a life event. right? A
Mm.
season change. I love to visit them on my birthday
Hmm.
because I've had 364 days of change since the last time. And I think if you haven't defined your core values, or if you're thinking, well, yeah, I think I know what they are, we do on the Red Threads Collective site, we do one of our goodies, one of our little sacred goodies is a core values exercise. I dropped the link in the chat. So go through that. Give yourself some time this weekend because what Molly's saying is so incredibly spot on that when we come from alignment, everything works better. Everything is in flow. And that is the same for our business. It's every decision we make, every yes, every confident yes, every hell no. All of
Hmm.
those things come from our values being fully in alignment. And so if you're ready to go through that process, feel free. If you've got questions, reach out to Molly, reach out to me. I'm happy to have those conversations with you because it fundamentally and foundationally is so incredibly important. And one of the things I'd love to talk about is what are some of the ways that we can begin to reconnect with the personal values that we have, especially, let's just be real. I feel like so many of us are in survival mode right now or on autopilot because of the chaos that's going on around us in the world that like, what are some of the ways that you're seeing, maybe it's with your students or with yourself in your own home, with your teenagers, what are some advice you have on us reconnecting with those?
Well, I mean, I think that some of the things that you've said are spot on. And there's a couple of like Stacy Stille was saying in the chat, like that you feel it when it's off. Yes, and then Kim Miller, I'm glad to see you here, Kim, a hockey friend. About the seasonal change, what's like for me, I think that's the key is that even if you've done it once, doesn't mean that you shouldn't be revisiting it and checking in often. My life has been definitely seasonal for sure. I mean, like I have reinvented my life like, three times now. And um, don't recommend it, but because of those shifts, of values, of changes, and it is I think it's active work. I love that you're doing it on your birthday, to check in to see where you are. Like, for me with my students, just asking the questions, like I don't have your answers for you, but I can know and I can help you with questions that got me to my answers,
Mm,
and
mm.
though like one of the biggest questions, and I mean, I think if you are asking like who am I, is probably too big. And so,
Yes, yes.
to start, but then the question is like, where are your triggers? Like where, because the those things that, so in yoga we call anything that's a high or a low, a trigger or a glimmer is an insight of something that's imbalanced. Right. And
Mm,
so when we are responding to something with our emotion is our internal regulatory system of giving us insight of what is inside of us. Anger is coming from inside of us. It exists there, right? It's a manifestation of something, some sort of imbalance. And so when we are tuning into what's happening inside of us, our feelings, emotions, our body as intelligence, that is where we will find those answers. And
mm.
like even today during my meditation, I started thinking about, my three kids being in college next year, and like the belly started like rising with anxiety, and then the fear of the financial constraints and just all of that like literally started to overtake me. And the antidote for that is always to find the equal and opposite emotion to balance and then
Mhm.
to try to bring that back into harmony. But it's like pay attention, breathing that healing into it, and then bring it into harmony with the equal and opposite emotion. So for me, that
Yes,
was peace this morning,
yes.
instead of anxiety. and then finding that peace.
Mm.
Um, but
Yeah,
it's not pushing it down. It's feeling all the feels, you know?
yeah, what I'm hearing is you have a value, you have value of family and you have a value of financial security.
Yes.
And when you're in your meditation and your body is responding, it's because your value of family and financial security feels a little uncertain, a little untethered.
Yep.
And so when we look at the when we're feeling those feelings, right? When we feel off and off from just our natural state. And that doesn't always mean fear or anxiety or concern. It can also mean joy and happiness and excitement, right?
Yeah.
Because alignment doesn't only when we're out of alignment, it doesn't feel great, but
Mhm.
when we're in alignment we also need to recognize that too, right? And
Right.
so I love the word of awareness, right? Like being very aware of how you're feeling, what is in your body when you are making plans, when you are meditating, when you are taking the walk with yourself without, ear pods in, where you are just in the moment. I think that's really important, especially for those of us who do feel a little bit like we're in survival mode or just keeping our heads above water. It's really paying attention and writing down what am I worried about right now? And how do I turn that worry into maybe more of a gentle concern?
Mm.
And then step into how am I out of alignment here? and and again, that really does impact business, life, relationship, all of it, all of it. So
Well, and that's the piece, like that's the missing connection that we're not talking about, right? Because we are talking about a lot of this work personally, but we're not drawing the connection into it as business because our worlds, our personal and our business worlds have been separate. And that is an illusion. There is no separateness is the illusion. Right. And so when you step into that idea of unity consciousness, right, or this idea that all is really one, and that starts to get a little bit out there, but um, when you start to realize that, then it's not a nice to have, it's essential. Um,
yes, yes,
and and that really is it. And you can't uncouple any of those things because if you are out of your zone of genius and doing work that is not um and again it's not about reaching and striving to be better. It's not that, right? We're all learning and growing in ways, but there are also things that we are inherently good at.
yes. Well, let's talk about that for a little
Yeah.
bit because I love how you used, of course, instead of zone of genius, which is a really cool term, you of course use natural genius. Mhm. Going right back to those nature roots. So let's
Mm.
talk about what's the difference and between our natural genius versus say our strengths or our skills. And what really is the difference? How can we begin to identify our own genius?
Yep.
Especially, and I'm going to say this loud for those in the back, especially if we've been downplaying it.
Yes. Right. I think that the rotten root, if you will, stems from this idea that our culture values certain skills, right? And so from the time that we were young, and I'm talking like school age or before, we were sort of channeled into this path of valued skills. Now, for me, that has been my story. I'm the good girl, people pleaser, do what's been told
Mm,
um, all my life, right? So developing skills that aren't necessarily what I love to do, or where I lose time when I'm doing them, or when I feel fulfilled and alive and all of those things when I'm doing them, right? just
Mm.
because I
Yeah.
could be good at something, because I've developed a skill, is different than getting lost in something. And so for me, that getting lost in something, my natural genius is when I'm creating anything. I love making things. I love art. I love to write. I love to make things. And so that is a zone of my genius that I had lost contact with because it's not necessarily valued, or you can't necessarily make money from it, or I mean,
Well,
all of
well,
those things, but you
let
can.
let me let me challenge that a little bit
Yeah.
because I think this is huge, Molly, because you actually do create, you were creating, you were just creating for someone else about something you didn't have a passion about, right? And I think this is actually huge for us, especially for those who are still entrepreneurs, right, who are working inside an organization, that we
Mhm.
can actually be tapping into a talent, but how we're using it, what we're using it for, doesn't feel good to us. Like
Which is the third piece, though.
yes, yes.
Yeah, the
And so
impact, that
it's
flag.
really important, right? It's really
Yep.
important to say like sometimes we can feel like why do I feel so burned out because I am doing the thing. I am speaking, I am writing, I am creating, I am organizing, but we're like, so why do I feel burnout? Why do I feel so exhausted? It's because we are, yes, tapping into that natural genius, that beautiful talent that our creator gave us. It's just where we've shoved it, where we're trying to fit it into this capitalistic environment that we're in. It's
Yeah,
not feeding our soul.
it's not. And that is why that last piece, that flag on the mountain, that impact, that thing that you are like, that you are willing to, you know, do whatever it takes to make happen, right? For me, that is leveling up the women in my life so that they can thrive. Like that
Mm.
thing, I will, yes, and, tell me how, kind of thing. And that's how I feel with my students when they're like, they come to me and they're like, yeah, I have this idea. I'm like, yes, and let's map it out. Like I would do that any time of day, any hour, you just make that call and I will 100% brainstorm with you because that fires me up, right?
Yes.
But you know what I mean? But if you're doing those things, and you're not having like it's for advertising or it's for, you know,
Yeah, well, let's just say like it's advertising a widget.
yes, exactly. It's like, yeah, no, the world has enough widgets, like I'm not actually going to be an empowered human if I'm pushing something that isn't firing my soul.
Yes, and maybe we go even deeper. Like it might be a widget for mechanics to use versus a widget that makes gardening so much easier and more enjoyable. Like you would thrive talking about the gardening tool and widget versus the one for the mechanic because you have a passion for gardening. You take your car to the mechanic to get it taken care of. Now, if you're a
Yes.
mechanic, then you would love to work on that widget. But we're saying like slow down and see where are you blessing others with your gift, and is it the right place? Because just because you can do it, right, doesn't mean it is the right fit, doesn't mean it's the holy hell yes.
Well, that's it, right? Because most of us live a half life doing half things, and pushing things out, right? And hacking things because we're not fully invested. And the thing that I know to be truer than true right now is that the most you the most me that I can be, right? Not trying to fit any kind of cultural norms, not trying to fit into any kind of social parameters, just being as true to myself and the truth that is inside of me.
Mm.
That expression is actually the work. And we just really haven't had permission, I think, to be full. Everything's always just half.
Yes. Well, I think again, let's dig into the unraveling of that, right? So when we're feeling in that, when we're feeling like we're leaving something on the table, when
Yep.
we feel like there's something more, we just don't know what it is, but we have that knowing, that internal call that's like, you're playing it small, you're playing it safe, or you're in the wrong field. Like those things, those moments, right? Those soul whispers that are saying that. What are what are some of the common signs that you see when someone is out of alignment? They may be doing all the right things on paper, right? They may be, they may have climbed the ladder and they're at the top of their game, and yet. So what are some things that we can look for in our own lives that will help us see, oh, that actually isn't just because I'm tired, it's because I'm actually out of alignment.
Yeah, I mean, I think the early signs are the body gives us the early signs, right? It's the dread, it's the belly stuff that we get. For me, my belly is my barometer. Like, um, I feel truth on the skin and I feel like dread in the belly, and getting very tuned into those intelligences or whatever, however your body speaks to you, I think is the first step. I also think like that knowing that you just said of that you're not quite in the right spot, that's actually not something to like that actually is the sign, you know. That little nag of in the ear, like it's not quite right, or you're sitting around the table with people who, aren't really lighting you up, or you're hearing words and making,
Ooh, let's not go further than that. Let's talk about sitting around the table with people who aren't really lighting us up, because
yeah,
I this is one of the main reasons that the collective exists, is
yeah,
because nearly every single fucking table that I was sitting at, I was either the only woman or the one of a couple of us.
yeah.
And even even in my zone of genius, even in my natural genius, even when I was in my flow, it wasn't always well received because of some of what you said earlier, right? That we learn at a very young age what's an important skill, and
Mhm.
let's call it what's a soft skill. I hate that term because like the soft skill
Let's just
is
call them
pretty much,
human skills now
yeah,
because we actually need them in an AI world. So they're actually
yes.
going to be
Ooh,
critical.
that's good. Human skill, yes. And I had this epiphany about uh, how that comes into play when we are young, right? And it I can't get it out of my head now that when we are in grade school and we're playing sports at recess, we hear things like, "Oh my God, he hits like a girl," or "He screams like a girl," or "He runs like a girl," or "He throws like a girl." And it's always saying the like a girl is less than
Mhm.
a boy. Instead of it being different,
Mhm.
certainly how a girl screams might be at a higher pitch because we got higher voices, right? And how we run might be different because our bodies are different,
Mhm.
right? But we don't learn that. We learn the norm to achieve is what a man does. The normal skills are what come naturally to men, and so anything we do is soft, therefore not as important. And what we're talking about here, which is so beautiful, is the reminder that everything is woven together. Our lives, our businesses, our homes, our families, our relationships, all of those things, there's no separation.
There is
It's
not.
all woven together into the most beautiful tapestry. And when we try to do the balance act, right? When
Mhm.
we try to say, oh, I'm going to do this role from 8 to 9, and then this role from 9 to 10, that we're out of whack. We are out of whack.
Well, and also to that point, that we each within us have masculine and feminine that also needs to be um, remembered, right?
Yes.
And it isn't a man versus woman. It's about masculine and feminine. And nature has already given us that blueprint of how the world creates or births
Yes.
things, right? You need
Yes.
both of those elements. to
Yes.
create. And that also has to be part of this equation. But I do think the signals of being around tables where you aren't seen
Mm,
or understood are also, again, signals that you're in the wrong spot.
yes.
Not that we have to fix it or fix how we communicate or fix what we're, if we're in our zone and sovereignty, right? But that we just haven't found the right table or seat. And for me,
Mm,
like that's the entrepreneurship education, right? About rethinking failure as just you're still learning instead
yes.
of right or wrong, but
Yes.
as just part of the growth process as you're preparing to do the thing that only you can do when you are in your wholeness.
So
Uh,
good. For those of you who don't follow Sarah Blakely on Instagram, I highly recommend her. She's the gal who created Spanx, and she talks about failure a lot because
mhm.
she grew
She's
up in a
Babson too,
household.
actually.
What's that?
She's a Babson grad.
Yeah. Oh, yes, yes, yes. Yeah, I think you told me that when you went up there. But Sarah grew up in a home where every night her dad would actually ask, like, "What did you fail at today?"
Mhm.
Like it was actually part of the day. And so the kids would actually try to do a lot of stuff so that they'd have something cool that they failed at to tell dad about.
Mm.
And it really is just a reframe, right? It's flipping the conversation. It's flipping the script around what failure is. Because failure is a word, but it doesn't have the power that the world has given it. It is actually the lesson. It is actually like, oh, I found a way that it didn't work.
That's right. Well, and
And
it's actually critical in business building, right? Because when things aren't working, instead of it being like it's not working, then the entrepreneur, is dissecting what's not working, and each of those things is the opportunity or the growth path. The same thing like in our body, what's not working, right? Well, the stomach ache or the sleeping or the non-sleeping or those things are also the same clues that something else isn't working. And those are also the clues that if explored and pressed, we will find the answers. But, there isn't the roadmap is the questioning, the self-reflection, um, trusting that you already have the answers inside of you. I don't
Mhm.
have your answers. I have my answers, and you
Right.
have your answers.
Yes.
But collectively together, having each other to ask questions
Mm,
is I think the key for us to walk together in a more intentional way. Um,
mm. I completely agree. I love what Stacy wrote in here about, she says, when we know there is a lack of alignment and has been clearly self-identified within us, it's fear that paralyzes us. And fear is in all caps. It locks
yes.
us in a standstill where anxiety thrives. Isn't, let's see. Isn't it interesting how we know what needs to be done, but fear is the big inner bully that holds us back from aligning? I think that's so important and it's so true. To again, we're talking about feeling the feelings, not shoving the feelings down, not saying, I've said it many times in my life, right? Like put your big girl panties on, right? Like there is a time and a place for that, but it's not every day. Like we do have to slow down and feel the feelings. The feelings are there for a reason. The fear, the anxiety, the butterflies in the belly, the raising of the hair on the back of your neck, the goosebumps on your arms, the headache, the neck ache, all up and down the chakra, right? Each one of those areas has a distinct feeling.
Yeah, it
And
really
if we
does.
don't slow down, we don't know what it feels like.
Yeah, that's exactly right. I mean, fear is, it is it's legit, right? And I think that's like not to be cliche, but the definition of courage is, moving beyond the fear. Not that you don't have it, but identifying it, naming it, and then proceeding in spite of it. And that is where, again, when braided with your values, your natural gifts, and where you're going, the work that only you can do for impact.
Mm,
When you have those things, you actually can move beyond fear because it's not just about you then. Like for me, like when I am feeling out of, like afraid of risk taking, like I have that thing out there that, like I'm creating something for someone else, which is bigger than me, right?
right.
It's bigger than the fear. And sometimes if you don't have that thing that's bigger than the fear, then that's the work. Ask like, what is bigger than that fear? Um,
Well, let's talk about that for, we've got about ten minutes. And so before we get into rapid fire and closing, I want to talk about being in seasons of transition, especially as women, whether that's a career pivot, we want to start our own business, we want to step into leadership with more fervor, or we're starting to plan what's next when we don't have work at the center of our lives so much, right? Whether we call it retirement or refiring into our third act, like how can we reweave our braids in a way that honors who we are today, right? Not simply who we've always been, right? So we don't have to say like I was a former VP and XYZ, where I can really be feel sovereign in the season I'm in today.
well, I think it, again, it comes back to entrepreneurial identity. Like when you know who you are and the work that you're doing, that doesn't necessarily mean the work that you're getting paid to do either, right? And
Mm,
I think there is a pretty important distinction from a job versus your work, right? Your
mm.
life work, that thing that you were put on this planet in this body to do. And I
Yes,
think
yes,
that's a
yes.
pretty huge distinction, right? A job versus work, and they may sometimes be the same. Hopefully, entrepreneurs are aligning those things, your a job and your work together, but or your mission or whatever that is, whatever language you that resonates. But I think understanding the work, because even when you're retired and you're no longer necessarily required to get a check, um, you're still going to be working, right? You still have that thing that your energy is um, being used for, or
Yeah. Yeah.
and
In
I
my
think
world, I call that your purpose, right?
yeah,
That calling.
exactly. You're
Yeah.
calling, right? And I just don't think it's different or that goes away. And I do think that um like I look at my mom who's 83 and she was a teacher, grade teacher for 35 years, and then she taught teachers how to be teachers at Ohio State, and now she's, volunteering, teaching children at the church,
Yep.
right?
Yep.
And it doesn't stop because what is the alternative for the stopping of the thing that only you can do, right?
Yeah.
Just entertainment instead
Yeah.
of, you don't want to just live a life of being entertained and numb. Like
Yeah.
that awakeness is really an important part of whatever it is that you do.
Oh, I
And
love
I don't
that.
think that necessarily shifts. Even though my mom had a job, and then she had a purpose of helping other people, and now she's helping, you know what I mean? It presents in different way, but the essence is still really the same. So,
Mm, I love this so much. So let's do a little rapid fire and then wrap it up with your final words of wisdom, and then I will bless us out. So are you ready to do some rapid fire? Let's try to do it rapid fire, which is I'm going to ask the question, answer, and I'm going to move on so that we don't get into the conversation.
okay,
That
okay, okay.
we can do it. We can do it. Are you
I know
ready?
you know how I'm not great at this.
Okay, ready?
Yes, let's do
Okay,
it.
if you could go back and whisper one truth about identity to your younger self, what would it be?
That it's meant to shift.
Ooh, what's one daily or weekly ritual that helps you stay aligned with your braid?
Meditation,
Mm. When you feel scattered or off, what is your go-to practice to reconnect with your purpose?
journaling,
Mm. One word to describe how it feels when your braid is fully aligned.
empowered,
Mm. A value you'll never compromise on.
think I've compromised on every one of my values, if I'm very honest. Which is why I, do so
Yes.
much
Yeah.
self-reflection. I don't know the answer to that one. I don't.
I'll reflect to you. I think it's family.
Oh yeah, 100%.
Your favorite way to ground and center yourself.
Meditation and or when I'm really fractured, I go sit in a bath for hours.
Yes. Nice salty bath.
Yeah, great.
Okay. Last one. Current book, podcast, or song that's lighting you up.
I'm gonna say the second edition of my book. And yeah, I'm having so much. I'm really enjoying coming back into this and adding into it. So yeah, anybody who reads, I have about 400 books on my, but I'm this one is bringing me joy.
I love it. I love it. All right. So, any last words of wisdom that we've sparked today that you want to sprinkle over us?
Yeah, I mean, I just again for those of you who are, in the thick of your career, whether you consider yourself an entrepreneur or not. Um, and for me, an entrepreneur is a problem solver, which I think all of us can identify with that um, definition. But knowing who you are, your values, uh, knowing what you are naturally born with, the skills that light you up, and then defining that impact that only you can create, and really thinking that through, it that is your braid. And that visual of a braid being really hard to break, it is the essence of feeling like you can do what you were born to do.
Mm, beautiful. Thank you, Molly. Oh my goodness. Thank you so much. All right, sisters, as we begin to close our sacred circle today, I invite us all to take one big collective breath together. Let's breathe in the gratitude for the wisdom that was shared. Let's ground to carry the insights that we've gathered in our baskets today. And also let's breathe in love, right? Let's really extend it to one another across the time zones, the seasons, the stages of our lives, because we are in this together. So let's take that one deep breath together. So as you carry Molly's three-strand braid with you, as you gather that visual, know that we will have that for you on the forum groups. So you'll have that beautiful visual, and we'll share additional resources there for the membership. I invite you to continue reflecting on what wants to be rewoven in your life, what
Mhm.
wants to come out and play in your work, right? What values are rising to the surface? Where is your genius asking to shine? And what visions are calling you forward? Because what we're talking about here is the work of alignment, and it is sacred.
Mm.
So before we part, I do want to remind everyone that next week is our collective conversation. And in addition to Molly and some other amazing Wise Council members and we have Vanessa Bergmark joining the circle. And if you've never met Vanessa, you are in for a treat. She is going to be joining us fresh off the airplane from an awe-inspiring journey in Kenya. She has been collaborating with a remarkable woman over there to empower an entire community in Africa through education, entrepreneurship, and heart-centered leadership. And she said something during my chat with her that just struck me so deeply. And I was like, please, please, please join us next week. She said, if more of us could recognize that our skills are needed worlds away, or
Mm.
even just in the next county, it
Mm.
doesn't just help others, it helps us.
Mm.
And so I know next week is going to be a rich and inspiring conversation. I hope that you'll be there. Remember, the collective conversation is our all cameras on. Well, you don't have to have your camera on, but it is the circle where we are on camera looking at one another and having a conversation. So if you have a story stirring in your heart, something popping up today, a lesson from your own braid of purpose, genius, vision, something that struck you today, or a moment from your journey that could inspire one of us, we invite you to bring it. Bring your voice, bring your wisdom, bring your presence. And they're not only welcome here, they are needed and they are so, so deeply, we are ready to receive. We are ready. Our vessels are ready to receive. So until next week, sisters, thank you so much for showing up today, showing up for yourself, showing up to support Molly, showing up to create a stronger circle here. I thank you for your presence, for your openness, for your comments, for your heart. May you move through these coming days with clarity, with courage, and connection, knowing that this sacred space is always here for you when you're ready to return. So, if we all take one final breath, we close our circle with love and intention. I'll see you all next week. And in between, I'll see you on the forum groups. Take good care, ladies. Love you all.
Bye-bye. Thank you.
Bye.